Well, this has to be one of the best interviews I've ever seen by the icon. Um, Charlie Rose is interviewing Leonard Nimoy. This is before he died in 2015. My mom passed away in 2013 and my dad in 2016. Leonard Nimoy, a Vulcan. My father was born in Vulcan, Alberta, and I spent my summers growing up there. I've always been intrigued with space and nature and music and birds. I'm Birdman, right? Yeah, I'm not afraid to jump out of planes, right? Yeah, he's all I have left to talk to. Yeah, everybody else is gone. Why? I don't know. But this is a really good interview. So this would have been before he died in 2015. I don't know what year.
Leonard Nimoy's portrayal of Mr. Spock in the television series Star Trek is one of the most recognizable and loved characterizations in popular culture. His single raised eyebrow and the curiosity with which he said, "fascinating," at an illogical emotional outbreak define the icon. In his book, I Am Spock, the actor-director gives his perspectives on the Star Trek phenomenon, his relationship with his co-stars, and the creation of the beloved pointy-eared alien, Mr. Spock. I'm pleased to have director Leonard Nimoy here with us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
I remember,
He was a
as
genius.
so many people do, an earlier biography of
He was in Mission Impossible and
Spock.
Twilight Zone and Outer Limits.
Well, I am. I always
all
have
kinds
been.
of
I always
shows.
have been. It's a question of semantics. The original was an attempt to come to grips with a question about how actors are perceived. If you're perceived as the character you portray, or is it clearly understood that you are the actor who is portraying the character? And it's in our language. We'll refer to an actor very often by the name of the character he plays. He is this character. He is. You've seen so and so.
Well, Peter Falk is Columbo.
Exactly. So,
Right.
and I had
You see how
experience
people
once that
perceive you?
I thought defined that issue. A lady stopped me at an airport, having recognized me, and introduced me to her little 6 or 7-year-old boy, and said, "This is Mr. Spock." And he wouldn't buy it. He just kept staring at me, and I understood that he wasn't ready to accept that shortcut in language yet. And I wrote about that. I wrote about that issue in the first book, and that's what the title grew out of. I was not Spock for him that day, and that's what I was dealing with. And now I'm having some fun with the title, and I've come to terms with the character.
Yeah. How have you come to terms with the character?
In this book, I have a series of dialogues which I hope punctuate the arc of the relationship at various stages along the way of what I'm experiencing in my work as the actor portraying the character, and where I think the character is at this particular point in the arc. I'm talking about over the last 20 years since the last book was published, and particularly dealing with the 6 films that have been made during that period of time, 2 of which I directed, 1 of which I produced. So I had a very heavy involvement in the life and death.
He did good as a director. I used to be a director.
And
I
finally,
made films
I reached a point in the last
in my
movie
teenage
in which
years.
I appeared in a scene with Bill Shatner, who plays Kirk, of course. Spock and Kirk are reminiscing as a couple of old guys, looking back on things.
Like me and
Spock
Abby.
somewhat disillusioned because of what has happened in this particular story. He says to Kirk something like, "Is it possible that we two, you and I, have become so rigid and so inflexible as to have outlived our usefulness?" And as I said it, and I'm looking at Bill, and I thought to myself, I could be asking Bill Shatner the same question about us in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And the mask slipped away and intrigued me again. I thought I've just found a defining moment here. The character and the actor have merged in their life experience at this point. It's Spock talking to Kirk, it could be Nimoy talking to Shatner.
Let me go back and come back to that point, but go back to the beginning and the shaping of the character. How much of you infused that character and defined him?
I had to find him, but once I did, I think I made a contribution. I had to find him. I wasn't Spock to begin with. I wasn't Spock-like. I was impassioned, and I was taught to be emotional as an actor. I learned to express emotion, not to repress
You
it,
restrained
suppress it.
yourself, and that brought out your
It was
character.
against the grain that I was working, that I was helped by directors to find the way. The first time I said fascinating, I said it wrong. There was something happening in
Too
the
emotional.
dramatic scene, and I, as Spock, said fascinating. And the director said, no, do that. And do the scientific, curious approach to it. And I thought, oh, interesting. I'm going to lose this moment here because I should be part of the scene. And I didn't realize that I would establish a very clear identity for myself simply by saying fascinating. And I did.
Yeah,
and
keep
then
it neutral.
The character began to emerge, and I began to understand the power of that.
How about the grip?
That was mine. It was one of those chancy things that might work and might become cartoony, but it worked in the context. It was a scene where Bill Shatner, as Kirk, had been split into two personalities by a malfunction.
Yeah, that was quite the episode. I used to watch that after school.
And
4 o'clock p.m. in the 70s.
About to kill the Mr. Jekyll character with a phaser, and it's written that Spock comes up behind the bad guy and hits him on the head with the butt of a gun, and I said, I don't think so. So the director said, what would you like to do? And I thought, well, let's try this. And I put
the nerve
on.
pinch.
Bill sold it. Bill froze up and dropped like a heap, and it worked.
Yeah, speaking of Bill, are you two, was there ever tension between the two of you?
Yeah, we had sibling rivalry. Is the best way to describe it.
Sibling rivalries.
No, not really. No, it was always
heard that
professional. It was
before.
always the work was always got done properly and was paramount.
But how did it manifest itself?
Paramount.
It could be testy arguments in the front office with over a script change or a character distortion.
But it was about
the work.
About the work and about what? I mean, how would you make the argument for Spock or for your
Well, it was
character?
Gene Roddenberry's
Had to
decision
do
of
with
who
how
got the
character was
lines.
Perceived, or
Yeah,
what
it
was
was
authentic and not authentic, and
Function. Whose function should this be? If there's a scientific
Yeah.
piece of research to be done here or information delivered, I'd say I think it's a Spock function.
Yes.
If it's a command function, tell the ship where to go and so forth, or tell Scotty or
Then it's James
Sue
T.
what to do
Kirk.
with the ship. That's a command function. When they would overlap,
True.
we'd get into gray areas and trouble.
if you had it to do, I'm sure you would do this. You would play Spock. Would you handle it differently? Not the character, but how you have lived with it and handled it. I mean, this book is I Am Spock, and the other one is I Am Not Spock. It partly answers that. But you know what I mean?
wrote two books. I Am Spock. I Am Not Spock.
I don't think I would have titled the other book I'm Not Spock. I was advised against it. Publishers advised me against it. They said it's a negative title, and their concern was economics. They said negative titles don't sell well, and I wasn't going to live with that. I wasn't really as concerned with the economics as they were, and I was very swift with my response. I said, "What about Gone with the Wind?" And I won the argument. They said, "Look, it's your book. We'll do whatever you want." I would not have titled it that way. It caused me some grief. But you make mistakes. You know.
Did Gene Roddenberry, back to the business about Bill Shatner, didn't Roddenberry call in Isaac Asimov and to Asimov to do something about the relationship between those characters?
That's the legend. I've seen it in writing, and I've reported it in this book too. That's the legend that he talked to Asimov about this rivalry.
Yeah.
Asimov said, "Make them."
I think he wrote the Martian Chronicles.
Make them totally loyal to each other. Make them as characters,
Right.
and that the audience would then have a perception that when you thought of one, you thought of the other, and they were symbiotic, and that seemed to help.
You've answered this question.
Good word,
1,000
symbiotic.
times, but one more time for me. How do you explain this success?
Yeah, Charlie, my explanation changes from day to day, and I'm sure it has to do with current events. And I say to myself, wouldn't it be nice in the near future, as we have in the 23rd century, to discover that we're in a society which is a meritocracy? Everybody gets the same breaks, everybody gets the same education, everybody gets the same kind of household and family life and so forth, and everybody gets the job that they really are qualified to do and holds the job if they do it well. Simple, plain and simple. There's no rhetoric.
Unless there's a recession.
There's no political infighting, no political agenda on anybody's part, and this is the
Oh,
Star
the
Trek
world has
If you stop and
changed,
think about
Spock.
it. It's a morally structured society. And I think it's a very, very desirable society. I wouldn't mind.
If only
there
you
is a
knew
kind
now.
of psychic need for that in the part of people's lives, some kind of structured society, some kind of structure
Morally
that
structured.
says moral structure.
That you
Sure.
can count on.
In a perfect
decent,
world.
where the right thing where things work out properly, where people who are professionals work together to solve the problem.
Yeah, it used to be that way.
Start at square one, and what's the next problem? Let's go to work again.
Did any of this involvement with this
Yeah,
character
things
make you
used to be
interested
easier.
in science fiction or in space or in...
Space, yeah.
Right.
I think I've had a long interest in science
Right,
fiction
Phoenix?
long before Star Trek. I read
Hey,
Tom
you.
Swift books when I was a kid.
Say it again. You're talking now. You're talking now.
And I
Hey,
was
you.
involved in science fiction long before Star Trek as an actor.
Hey, you.
My very first experience in science fiction was in a weekly theatrical serial called Zombies of the Stratosphere. And I'm here to admit
And
that
he
I
was
played
good
zombies
In Search Of. I used to watch In Search Of
I
back
did a lot of
in
science fiction before Star Trek.
1978,
But
1979. He did a
particularly
series In Search Of
interplanetary communication.
the Bermuda Triangle
in
and
terms of whether they're people...
UFOs.
I'm looking for the day that we hear from them.
Well,
But the
I
SETI
could tell you a
program
few
has
stories.
their first contact and says we have a signal. That
Did
we
you say it
believe
again?
Is technically
Hey, you.
produced, not
I heard you.
accidental, but intentionally produced by another
Hey, you.
civilization someplace.
Why do you believe they're there?
Well, I believe in the numeric aspects of it, the probabilities with so many thousands and thousands of other planets circling so many thousands of suns like ours. I believe the probabilities are great.
It would be arrogant for us to say that
I
we're the
was...
Yeah, what's known as the Drake equation.
The Drake equation, yeah, I know that.
That there's a civilization out there.
Well, if there wasn't anybody else out there, what an incredible waste of space.
only.
And I got proof. I got evidence. I wasn't the only one who saw it on September 20th of 2024
I haven't heard any rumble. I did about a year ago.
at a lake,
have
camping and
inquired about
fishing.
doing a couple of specials, and I've heard nothing since. We did 144 shows. It started out to be, I thought, a year or two, maybe 30, 40, 60 shows. We did 144 episodes. It was amazingly popular.
And how much involvement did you have in other than just simply hosting it?
In some episodes, I had none except the hosting duties, and some I wrote, produced, directed, depending on the subject matter.
You were an amazing director,
a lot of strong feeling about it.
and so was I at one time.
Anything you really wanted to do that you haven't done?
No.
But then I had two daughters, and I had a family to take care
I've
of.
written, I've produced. I set out to make a living in the business, hopefully as an actor.
Right.
I find myself having had a wonderful directing run, and maybe more to come. I'm writing more than I ever expected to.
My father
I have the welcome
was born in Vulcan.
I'm just a very lucky guy who's had a great run.
Coincidentally, my father was born in Vulcan, Alberta, Canada. And I grew up there in the summer, and he, before Leonard Nimoy died, he came to Vulcan and he said, "It's good to be back home."
I did a movie with Diane Keaton and Liam Neeson, which was not very successful commercially.
Vulcan,
the story is essentially a tragic
they
story.
commercialized it. Vulcan was commercialized out of Star Trek, but when I grew up in Vulcan, it was just the wheat capital of Canada.
I have a novel in the works. Why are you laughing?
It's so weird to see Spock laugh because he never did that on the show.
And
He restrained
the
himself.
novel is about a
What?
character that I'm developing who's
What?
here, implanted
Hey,
by
you.
an alien society
Hey,
to
you.
study humanity. For guess what
What?
reason?
Oh, you're
Because
dancing.
They are technologically
Dance.
advanced and
Hey, you.
extraordinarily successful technologically.
Hey, you.
Sociologically, they're a mess, and they think humans have figured out how to do it. So they've sent an implant here to study the society.
And he may have another book on Spock, too.
It's obvious that humans haven't figured anything out yet.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Look forward to seeing you next time. See you then.
Great interview.